大家好，我是 Jenny， 欢迎来到沉思者 J。 有一个人，他抛下了一切，工作、家庭、欧洲的繁华，他跑到了地球的另一端，去追一个别人不懂的梦。他叫保罗高更，一个矛盾的天才，一个逃亡者，也是一个改变了艺术史的人。今天的故事从一个股票经纪人开始说起。1848年，保罗高更出生在巴黎，他的父亲是一位记者，母亲有一半秘鲁原住民的血统。这个血统后来成了高更心中永远燃烧的火种。高更3岁的时候，父亲在前往秘鲁的船上突然去世，母亲带着他和姐姐在利马住了4年。那段南美洲的童年记忆深深刻进了他的灵魂，鲜艳的色彩，奔放的自然和那种原始而纯粹的生命力，是他后来一生追寻的东西。17岁，高更跑去当水手，在海上飘荡了6年，走遍了南美洲和大西洋。回到法国之后，他找到了一份稳定的工作，成为巴黎一家券商的助理，后来升到了股票经纪人，收入优渥，娶了一位丹麦籍的妻子梅特苏菲加德，生了5个孩子。按照当时的标准，他过着一个成功男人应有的生活，但他的内心从来没有安静过。他开始学画，一开始只是周末的消遣。他去上课，认识了毕沙罗，印象派的重要人物。毕沙罗看了他的画，说了一句话：你有天分。高更的灵魂被点燃了。1879年，他第一次参加了印象派画展。那一年他31岁，还是一个业余画家，但他心里已经有一个声音在说，这才是我真正的人生。接下来几年，他继续白天上班，晚上画画，直到1883年，法国股市大崩盘，高更失去了工作。他做了一个决定，让所有人都目瞪口呆的决定。他决定全职画画。他以为可以靠卖画为生，但现实是残酷的，画卖不出去，家里开始断粮。妻子梅特带着孩子回到了丹麦娘家，高更从此和家人渐行渐远。有人说他自私，有人说他疯了，但高更自己说，艺术是一种召唤，不是一种选择。1886年，他搬到了布列塔尼的一个小村庄，叫做彭达旺。那里的生活比巴黎便宜，而且还有一种古老而粗犷的气息。他在那里遇到了一群年轻画家，他们围绕着高更，听他讲艺术的理念。高更开始发展出他自己的风格，他称之为综合主义，用粗犷的轮廓线条、大块的平涂色彩来呈现一种接近原始的视觉力量。这个时期，他也和梵谷发生了一段著名的相遇。1888年10月，高更因梵谷的邀请，来到了法国南部的阿尔勒。他们住在一起，一起创作，一起争论艺术。梵谷崇拜高更，但两人的个性和理念碰撞得非常剧烈。梵谷情绪不稳定，高更个性强硬，两人的关系越来越紧张。直到12月的那个夜晚，梵谷割下了自己的一只耳朵，高更吓得连夜逃回了巴黎。这段关系就这样结束了。那次事件之后，高更更加确定了一件事，他不属于这里，不属于欧洲，不属于这个充满病态和压抑的文明。他想要找一个地方，那里的人还没有被西方文明污染，还保有着人类最原始的灵魂。1891年，他卖掉了所有作品，在巴黎办了一个筹款拍卖会，然后买了一张船票，前往南太平洋的大溪地。那一年他43岁。大溪地带给了高更他一直在寻找的东西，鲜艳到几乎不真实的色彩，和自然融为一体的生活方式，还有那些充满生命力的人们。他开始疯狂的创作，画面里充满了热带植物、深色皮肤的人物、神秘的宗教符号和一种只有在遥远的方才有的宁静。这个时期他的代表作之一叫做《我们从哪里来，我们是什么，我们往哪里去》。这幅巨大的画作宽约3.7公尺，高更在完成它之后， 曾经试图服毒自尽，因为他觉得这幅画已经是他的顶峰了，超越不了了。幸好他活了下来，那幅画后来成了艺术史上最重要的作品之一，现在收藏在美国波士顿美术馆。但大溪地的生活并不如他想象中那么纯粹。那个时候法国已经统治了大溪地，殖民地的官僚和传教士早就改变了岛上的文化。高更失望了，他和殖民地政府发生冲突，为当地原住民的权益发声，写文章批评教会和政府，让他树立了很多敌人。他的生活越来越贫困，健康也越来越差。他患有梅毒，腿部有伤口，几乎无法行走，但他还是继续画画。1901年，他离开了大溪地，前往更偏远的马克萨斯群岛，在那里的西瓦瓦岛定居，继续他的创作，继续他的抗争。1903年5月8日，保罗高更在西瓦瓦岛与世长辞，享年54岁。他死的时候，身边几乎没有人，房子里只剩下一些画作和几个用来创作的工具。那个时候没有人知道，这些画作将在几十年后卖出令人咋舌的天价。2015年，他的一幅作品《当你结婚》以将近3亿美元的价格成交，成为当时史上最贵的画作之一。但回到他活着的时候，他一生都在贫困和疾病中挣扎，从来没有真正得到他渴望的认可。他是一个矛盾的人，这一点无法否认。他抛弃了妻子和孩子，在大溪地的时候，他和很年轻的当地女性同居。有些历史记载令人不安，我们今天用现代的标准来看，他的某些行为是不可接受的，这是事实。但同时，他也是一个对殖民主义提出批判的人。他在生命的最后几年，不断地为原住民的权利发声。他批评传教士破坏当地文化，批评法国殖民政府的压迫，甚至为此被判了入狱。虽然他在服刑前就去世了，他是一个自我中心的艺术家，也是一个对不公义充满愤怒的人。他的矛盾和他的才华一样真实。从艺术的角度来说，高更的影响是革命性的。他打破了印象派对于光线和自然观察的执着。他说，不要画你看到的东西，要画你感受到的东西。他用颜色来表达情感，而不是用颜色来模仿现实。这个理念直接影响了后来的野兽派，马蒂斯和德朗都受到了高更的启发。表现主义也在他的理念中找到了根源。甚至毕卡索说过，高更是现代艺术真正的父亲之一。他带着欧洲人的眼睛去看一个非欧洲的世界。他的画面里有一种东西，是当时的欧洲绘画里从来没有的。那是一种对文明的怀疑，一种对原始状态的向往，一种问题：我们这样生活，真的对吗？这个问题，在他那幅最伟大的画作里，被直接写进了标题：我们从哪里来？我们是什么？我们往哪里去？这不只是一幅画的名字，这是一个人用他的一生在问的问题。高更的故事教会了我们什么？也许是这样，追求一件事需要付出真实的代价，不是在网络上说我很有梦想，而是真的把一切都压上去。高更压上了他的婚姻，他的财富，他的健康，最后是他的生命。他不是一个完美的人，但他是一个真实的人。他的画作告诉我们，这个世界比我们以为的要大得多，也美得多。他的那个问题，我们从哪里来？我们是什么？我们往哪里去？至今没有答案，但也许问题本身就是答案。感谢你今天陪我聊了保罗高更的故事，一个跑到世界尽头去寻找自己的人。下次我们继续探索更多伟大灵魂的生命故事。我们下次见咯。
Hello everyone, I'm Jenny. Welcome to Thinker J. Imagine a man who walks away from everything: his career, his family, his comfortable life in one of the most beautiful cities in the world. He boards a ship, sails to the other side of the earth, and never really comes back.
His name is Paul Gauguin, a man of contradictions, a man of genius, a man who changed the course of art history. And today, we are going to talk about why he did it, and what it cost him. The story begins with a stockbroker. Paul Gauguin was born in Paris in 1848. His father was a journalist. His mother had partial Peruvian indigenous ancestry. That lineage would become a kind of ember burning inside him for the rest of his life. When Gauguin was just 3 years old, his father died aboard a ship bound for Peru. His mother took him and his sister to Lima, where they lived for 4 years. Those years in South America left a deep impression on the young boy. Vivid colors, a way of life connected to nature, and a raw, primal energy that seemed to pulse through everything around him. He would spend the rest of his life chasing that feeling. At 17, Gauguin became a sailor. He spent 6 years at sea, traveling through South America and across the Atlantic. When he returned to France, he found steady work as a stockbroker in Paris. He was good at it. He earned a good salary. He married a Danish woman named Mette Sophie Gad. They had 5 children together. By every conventional measure, he was a successful man living a successful life. But something inside him was restless. He started painting in his spare time. Just as a hobby, on weekends. He took lessons. He met Camille Pissarro, one of the central figures of Impressionism. Pissarro looked at his work and said something that changed everything. He told Gauguin he had real talent. That was all it took. In 1879, Gauguin participated in an Impressionist exhibition for the first time. He was 31 years old and still working as a stockbroker. But something had shifted inside him. A voice had started speaking, telling him that painting was his real life. That everything else was just waiting. For the next few years, he lived a double existence. Working by day, painting by night. But then came 1883. The French stock market collapsed. Gauguin lost his job. And he made a decision that stunned everyone around him. He decided to become a full-time painter. He believed he could live by selling his work. Reality had other plans. The paintings would not sell. Money ran out. His wife Mette took the children back to Denmark to live with her family. Gauguin and his family drifted further and further apart. He never fully lived with them again. People called him selfish. People said he had lost his mind. Gauguin himself said that art is not a choice. It is a calling. In 1886, he moved to a small village in Brittany called Pont-Aven. Life there was cheaper than Paris. And there was something rough and ancient about the place that appealed to him. A group of younger painters gathered around him, listening to his ideas about art. Gauguin was developing a style of his own. He called it synthetism. Bold outlines. Large flat areas of pure color. A visual language that felt primal and direct. Something far removed from the delicate optical effects of the Impressionists. It was during this period that he had his famous encounter with Vincent van Gogh. In October of 1888, Gauguin accepted an invitation from Van Gogh to come to Arles in the south of France. The two men lived together, created together, argued about art with enormous intensity. Van Gogh admired Gauguin deeply. But they were very different people. Van Gogh was emotionally volatile. Gauguin was stubborn and domineering. The tension between them built slowly and then broke all at once. One December night, Van Gogh cut off his own ear. Gauguin fled back to Paris the same night. Their relationship was over. That episode confirmed something in Gauguin. He did not belong here. Not in Europe. Not in this civilization that he saw as sick and suffocating. He needed to find a place where people still lived close to the earth. Where human beings had not yet been dulled by modernity. In 1891, he sold everything he had. He organized an auction of his paintings in Paris to raise money. Then he bought a ticket to Tahiti. He was 43 years old. Tahiti gave him what he had been searching for. Colors so vivid they seemed almost unreal. A way of life woven into the rhythms of nature. People who moved through the world with a kind of ease and presence that he had never seen in Europe. He began to paint with furious energy. His canvases filled with tropical plants and dark-skinned figures. Mysterious religious symbols and a stillness that felt sacred. A world that seemed to exist outside of time. One of his greatest works from this period carries a title that reads like a philosophical question. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? It is a massive painting, nearly 4 meters wide. Gauguin reportedly completed it in a state of near delirium. And when he finished, he attempted to take his own life. He had swallowed arsenic. He believed he had created his masterpiece and had nothing left to live for. He survived. The painting went on to become one of the most celebrated works in art history. It now hangs in the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. But Tahiti was not the pure, untouched paradise he had imagined. France had colonized the island decades earlier. Missionaries and colonial officials had already reshaped the culture significantly. Gauguin was disappointed. And then he became angry. He began to clash with the colonial government. He wrote articles criticizing the church and the colonial administration. He spoke out for the rights of indigenous Tahitians. This made him powerful enemies. His life grew increasingly difficult. He was desperately poor. His health was deteriorating. He had contracted syphilis. His legs were covered in painful sores that made walking agonizing. But he kept painting. In 1901, he left Tahiti and moved even further from the world he had known. He settled on the island of Hiva Oahe in the Marquesas Islands. A more remote, wilder place. He built a house there and called it the House of Pleasure. He continued to paint. He continued to fight the colonial authorities. He continued to write. On May 8, 1903, Paul Gauguin died on Hiva Oahe. He was 54 years old. He died nearly alone. The house around him held a few paintings and his tools. Nothing else. No one in the wider world fully understood yet what those paintings were worth. In 2015, one of his works titled When Will You Marry fetched close to $300 million at auction. At the time it was among the highest prices ever paid for a painting. But while he was alive, Gauguin spent most of his adult years in poverty, illness, and isolation. He never received the recognition he longed for. He was a man of profound contradictions. This cannot be denied. He abandoned his wife and 5 children. In Tahiti and the Marquesas, he entered into relationships with very young local women. Some historical records are deeply troubling by any modern standard. These are facts. They deserve to be acknowledged honestly. And at the same time, he was a man who pushed back against colonial power when almost no Westerner was doing so. In his final years, he became a genuine advocate for the rights of indigenous people in the Pacific. He wrote scathing criticism of missionary interference in local culture. He confronted the French colonial government directly. He was sentenced to prison for his attacks on officials. He died before he could serve the sentence. He was a selfish artist. He was also a man of genuine moral courage in ways that surprised people. His contradictions were as real as his genius. Neither cancels the other out. From the perspective of art history, the impact of his work was revolutionary. He rejected the central premise of Impressionism. The Impressionists were devoted to capturing light as the eye actually perceives it. Gauguin said that was not enough. He said you should not paint what you see. You should paint what you feel. He used color as an emotional force rather than as a description of visual reality. The greens in his paintings are not the green of actual leaves. They are the green of a particular feeling about leaves. About life. About something ancient that hums inside living things. This idea had an enormous influence on everything that came after. The Fauve, including Henri Matisse and André Derain, took Gauguin's use of bold expressive color and ran with it. Expressionism found roots in his philosophy. Pablo Picasso once credited Gauguin as one of the true founding fathers of modern art. He also brought something else into Western painting that had never been there before. A serious, sustained questioning of the value of Western civilization itself. His images of life in Polynesia were not just exotic travelogues. They were a challenge. He was asking whether the world that Europe had built was actually as advanced as it claimed to be. Whether so-called progress had not stripped something essential from human existence. That question lives at the center of his greatest painting. It is even written directly into the title. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? That is not just a painting title. That is a man asking the most fundamental questions of his existence. Using every last thing he had. His health. His comfort. His safety. His relationships. His entire life. What does the story of Paul Gauguin teach us? Maybe this. Some people are made for one thing. And they know it very early. The question is whether they are willing to pay the actual price. Not the comfortable version of the price. Not the price they wish it cost. The real price. Gauguin paid the real price. His marriage. His relationship with his children. His financial security. His health. Eventually his life. He was not a good man in every sense of the word. But he was a real man. A man who took his vision seriously enough to destroy everything else for it. His paintings are the evidence. They are evidence that this world is larger and stranger and more beautiful than most of us allow ourselves to believe. And they carry a question inside them. A question he spent his whole life asking. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Nobody has answered it yet. Maybe the asking is the point. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today talking about the life of Paul Gauguin, a man who sailed to the edge of the world looking for something true. Next time, we will explore another extraordinary life. See you next time.